Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. It's 7 p.m., at least Pacific time, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 255 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction, and I am joined by my fellow nerd, a connoisseur not only of video games, but of comedy in general. He's not only the first option, he's the best option, a stand up comedian, stand up guy, Mr. Lam Galuka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And for the next hour, we are going to cover topics about video games, ranging from things to news, history, trivia, lawsuits, and everything in between. Mr. Nice Guy, how are you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic. I feel like that intro, a smidge long. And this is a guy who has no ego. So maybe that's just me being self-conscious. But I don't know. Stand-up comedian, stand-up guy, kind of the same thing. I think maybe we could cut it back. You could just say, hey, I'm here with my buddy. We're going to talk about some games. What do you think about that? Shortened intro.
Hard disagree. There are so many stand-up comedians that are not a stand-up guy like you are. It's got to stay.
Okay. I'll concede that point. Well, Mac, to answer your question, life is good. I'm extremely excited to talk about watching and playing today. Playing some really cool stuff, watching some really cool stuff, started making some new content that we may talk about later on in the show. And we've been getting these episodes up on YouTube, man. And to top it off, just had a great 3-day weekend. Shout out to Martin Luther King Jr. for all he did to fight for equal rights. Phenomenal 3-day weekend. How are you, Mac?
I am doing pretty darn well. I had a much less eventful than usual holiday weekend, but still, it was nice to have an extra day to hang with my spouse. So, yeah, it was good times.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, man, I don't have tons of cool stories to tell this week. Nothing out of the ordinary. So if you're okay with it, I say we do what we do best and just hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. What is new in video gaming, my friend?
Well, Mac, we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. And the first thing we're going to talk about, I know we have a segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing. But I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention The Last of Us HBO show. This is from Deadline.com by Peter White. Here's what he has to say about the show, the first episode. The Last of Us drew a healthy number for HBO on Sunday night. The video adaptation starring Pedro Pascal drew 4.7 million viewers across linear and HBO Max. It marked the largest debut after House of Dragon since Boardwalk Empire launched in 2010. The Game of Thrones spinoff made history last year, premiering with 9.986 million viewers across linear and HBO Max, the largest audience for any new original series in the history of pay cabler. Now, Mac, I'm just going to tell y'all, spoiler alert, I watched the first episode of The Last of Us, and I enjoyed it. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. Did you get to check it out? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I did get to check it out. Thumb to the side.
What? Are you kidding me? I feel like it was objectively good. I saw a lot of tweets, people talking about, oh, I knew what was going to happen, and I still shed a tear. And to me, that's a sign of great television. Now, I thought it was 2 thumbs up to the sky. I thought it was amazing. We'll talk about it more later. I'm really interested to hear why you're lukewarm on the show. Are you going to tell us?
To tell you about why I'm lukewarm on the show.
Okay, well, you'll tell us later. Regardless of how you feel, I think that this has the potential to be a really, really good overall video game adaptation and potentially open the door for some of the other stuff that's out there. Because the reality is that video game storytelling, in my opinion, just as good as any other medium, it just doesn't always transfer well. So I'm excited to see what that looks like, Mac. You agree? You disagree? What do you think?
100% agree with the sentiment. I think it is a artistic expression. It is unique. It's the newest type of artistic expression. I mean, because ever since we've had movies for more than 100 years, video games for really only the last 50. So it's the newest. It's also, I think, one of the more interesting. But yeah, it's the translation between the two types of expressions. Does it work? We've seen sometimes that it doesn't, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that there is still my feelings side, and I'll go more into that later. I think it is promising.
No pressure Super Mario movie coming out later this year. Next news story, IGN.com from Taylor Lyles. This is about the Stadia shutting down, Mac. I know you were a big believer in the Stadia, and unfortunately, it did not work out.
For those of you who are not watching the video, I gave Mr. Nice Guy a look that could kill. Not watching the
Yeah, and I
video,
think I just
I gave
accidentally
Mr. Nice
either
Guy
I'm
a look that
unmuted on the thing or you
not
are
watching
yeah, on the Twitch thing. Here we go. There we go. I fixed it. I fixed it. Well, here's the next news story. Google is shutting down Stadia tomorrow, but before it does, the company has rolled out a new support tool that allows owners of the Stadia controller to use it as a Bluetooth controller, meaning the controller won't be entirely useless after the cloud gaming service shuts down. Once installed, it will deactivate the proprietary Wi-Fi connection previously on the Stadia controller and allow you to connect to devices that support Bluetooth Low Energy, Bluetooth LE. Once the update is installed, you can pair the controller to a supported Bluetooth LE device by pressing the Stadia button and the Y button concurrently for 2 seconds until the status light shows an orange flash. I love that they explain like how to do it in the article. Important to note, this update will permanently disable the Wi-Fi connectivity of the controller. So hold off on updating the controller if you want to play games on Stadia one final time before the service shuts down tomorrow. Now, Mac, here's the interesting thing about this. Specifically reading that after the Stadia officially shuts down on January 18th, Stadia controller users will have until December 31st, 2023 to update the controller so it can use Bluetooth mode. So it's interesting, Mac. Last week we talked about the Meta Quest and how it's hardware that's losing support. Now we're talking about a system that's losing support, but the hardware is going to continue to be supported in short term. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, in the sense that the one piece of the hardware, is going to be useful. Yeah. Whereas, like you said, with the Meta Quest, everything's going to go. But I think it feels a little bit different just because of how much less was bundled up in just the Stadia controller as opposed to the
Fair,
headset
fair.
and the equipment and everything. I think it feels a little different, but on principle, I think you're right to highlight that it's not all that different, just in two different directions. Does that make sense? I feel like I rambled.
No, it does make sense. I guess the thing that confuses me, and I think I know the answer, but why didn't they just give the Stadia controller Bluetooth support in the first place? You know what I mean?
I imagine it was probably something to do with trying to make sure that the Stadia controller only worked with one thing, or primarily worked with just one thing. You know what I mean?
And keep in mind, for the uninitiated, the Stadia was effectively an online service, came with a controller, but you could do Stadia on your iPad, on your phone, on your PC, on anything that you could, connect to via Wi-Fi. I believe you could even do it on your television. It's just interesting to me that they kept it locked up, and all it took was a software update. Now, Mac, my second question for you on this topic: what are your thoughts on this software update only being available until December 31st of 2023?
So, to evidence that I am not an unreasonable person, I think to allow this to keep going for a year after the closing down of everything else, the shuttering of everything else, I think that's probably a reasonable enough window for
Yeah,
something that's going to close entirely. But uh, how much storage space could that update information possibly take? Could it possibly cost? How many servers could you possibly require for you to leave that up for, I don't know, 2 years. Is it really costing you that
Well,
much,
I don't
Google?
know. But I mean, once you say, well, how about just not 2 years? Then it's like, well, then why not 3? And then why not 4? Like, there's always going to be someone who misses out on this. But it's interesting
Mhm.
because if you don't update this, your controller is literally going to be a paperweight. Um,
Yep.
and I don't need any more gaming stuff, but part of me wants to go get a Stadia controller just because I
Just to
never.
have a piece of history for the
Yeah,
shelf.
yeah, and I never picked up a Steam controller, and I regret it. Maybe I'll try to go find a Stadia controller. I don't know. I just think this is interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting. I mean, to be clear, I am well spotted by Mr. Nice Guy, the person who would indeed just keep pushing and pushing. Of course, I primarily push that with respect to video games themselves. Like it couldn't possibly cost you what could a server cost these days? $10? Um why not just keep at it for a little bit longer with video games, but
people
anyway,
people in the chat
it's
saying things
I
like I love
will
my Steam
say
controller. I'm jealous. I'm jealous. They were $5. They were $5 and I didn't buy one and now I wish I had. Sorry, Mac, go ahead.
I, no worries. I was going to say I will say that with respect to the Stadia, very few video games are going to disappear forever now that the Stadia shuts down tomorrow. Very few. I think there's only two that were both Stadia exclusives and not expected to be released for other platforms. I still think it's a travesty that any video games are potentially lost forever
Yeah.
because it's unlikely that that IP will be picked up by anybody or even how. It's unclear how on earth you would get the intellectual property rights from a defunct Stadia where
Right.
nobody has there's not a single person presumably who would have a copy of the executables that could be distributed or saved or rescued.
Right.
So yeah, I have no idea how we would go about recovering those, or even how someone who wanted to make money off of them could purchase them.
Someone in the
And that is a travesty.
someone in the chat says something interesting. They say I feel bad for the Stadia. It was a great idea that the world wasn't quite ready for yet. It would have been a hit 20 years from now. I agree, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we get to topic of the week. But for now, let's keep things moving. This one's from Kotaku AU by Zach Zweisen, and it's about video game sales numbers and hardware sales numbers. Lots of hardware talk today. Here's what this says. Now that 2022 is over, the NPD group has done its thing, collecting and processing all the resulting sales data. Now we can look back at the last 12 months and see what games and consoles sold best and how much money people spent on this stuff. Shocking nobody. Nintendo had another successful year, while Elden Ring nearly topped the charts, beating out both God of War and Madden. So here's the interesting thing, Mac. When I scrolled down and I looked at these sales numbers, I'm just looking at games that sold the most. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I think it says something about the video game industry. Chat, I want to hear what you have to say too. Here's the list of games 1 through 10 that sold the best last year. Number 1, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Number 2, Elden Ring. Number 3, Madden NFL 23. Number 4, God of War Ragnarok. Next is Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. Then you got Pokemon Scarlet Violet. Next is FIFA. Then Pokemon Legends Arceus, Horizon Forbidden West, and then MLB The Show 22. Mac, none of the games that were nominated for Game of the Year won. And additionally, there are 3 sports games and Call of Duty on the list.
Also noteworthy about your list, Mr. Nice Guy, is that all of those were continuing a franchise, either, like directly or as part of something related. Even though, like, the Pokemon games, for example, are not all, it's not like, it's, what am I trying to say? It's not like direct sequels,
Sure,
but they're
sure.
also still continuing a kind of like Final Fantasy, right?
Sure.
Yeah. They're
Sure.
not direct sequels, but they're all connected, presumably, in some way.
Yeah, 100%. I think the thing that's so interesting to me, and I'm not the type of person who hates on Call of Duty or the quote unquote bro gamer. I like Call of Duty as much as the next person. I just think it's interesting that what is potentially and arguably one of the best video games ever made in Elden Ring is being outsold by something that is much more broadly understood and accessible. And it says something about the games industry. Just because a game is the highest rated doesn't mean that it's the most popular. And I like that. I'm not complaining at all. I think it's fantastic that a game like Elden Ring could win Game of the Year, even though it's outsold by something that's popular every year. Mac, would you agree?
Um, well, maybe so. Let me say, obviously, Elden Ring won with lots of critical acclaim.
Sure.
But sales numbers is not the only metric, and neither is awards. We do have various, shall we say, aggregators for things like playtime as well as user reviews. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Mr. Nice Guy, but is there any clear lean of, for example, Elden Ring having more play hours or having
Oh,
I don't know, higher reviews than Modern Warfare 2?
I actually, if you looked at Metacritic, I would bet. I'm not a betting man. If I was, I'd bet a good amount of money that Elden Ring has a higher Metacritic than Modern Warfare 2, guaranteed.
Hmm.
And anyone in the chat can
Okay.
fact check me. I would guarantee that. But in terms of play hours, you're probably right. Like the number of play hours across the industry, likely higher for Modern Warfare 2 than they are for Elden Ring. And part of that is because we now know it sold more. Um, but I
Mhm.
do know people playing Elden Ring putting in 100, 200, 300 hours into it as individuals. So there's that.
And I think it is rightly pointed out by Galvatron that Elden Ring does fit to that same narrative of it's basically Dark Souls 5. It's not really new IP. Which I think is also very fair. But yeah, I don't think that the sales numbers speak as big of volumes, particularly because I think there are a lot of people who are just going to come back, especially with sports games, or any franchise that does the renewal every single year. I think you've got your built-in fan base pretty much, and it's easier to get those dollars. It's harder for people to convince, gamers to part with their money for a new or a different thing. So I feel like it's very much momentum. You know what I mean?
I agree. No, I agree with you 100%. Well, Mac, you're a physical gamer in terms of you like your physical games. And so this last story I think is going to be right up your alley, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this. This is on GameSpot.com by Devontae Chisholm, and it's about the rumored PlayStation 5 detachable disc drive. Now, this has been rumored since September, but we continue to get more and more news about this rumor. This is written today. According to Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson, the possible PS5 Slim doesn't seem like there are any major hardware changes from the original console. Tom went on to add that the disk drive might not work with current digital editions. If this is true, that is a very odd decision for Sony to make. The internals are identical, so someone correct me if I'm wrong, the author says, but shouldn't the current digital console just need a firmware update? I'm not interested in buying one, he says. I love the digital life despite its shortcomings, but for those of you that are, maybe a third party will make them as well. Then current digital owners can be the proud owner of a Mad Catz PS5 disc drive. I like that. So, Mac, bottom line here, PlayStation 5 has been out for 3 years. Of course, it's time for a refresh, right? This is why we can't have nice things. We always expect a refresh. People are anticipating that there will be a PS5 disc drive that can go with the new version of the PS5 Slim, but they're saying that this disc drive would not work with the previously released digital-only PlayStation 5. If you're a PS5 digital owner, are you mad about this? Or are you just sticking with that digital life decision that you made?
So, Mr. Nice Guy, if we had, like, I am a physical person. I care about having the physical discs, like you say,
Sure,
but that's
sure.
really only so far as it is a gateway to ensuring that I still have a copy of the game to play. If that wasn't so tied up with having a copy on hand, and it isn't always, especially with things that have online only play or constant online DRM checks, things like that. That's not even a safety net, as it were. Um, but the physical tends to make it so that it will endure past normal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
if we had if we had a real good history of us preserving the non-physical side of stuff,
Sure,
I
sure.
wouldn't nearly be as big of a physical guy as I am, but it's merely a means to an end. That being said, if I had gone with a digital PS5, now, how long ago did we hear that we were going to have this external disk
It
drive
is
for the
it is a
PS5?
rumor, it is a rumor, but the first we heard about it was September of last year. So this is a recent rumor.
Okay, so it's not like people bought the digital only PS5 under the knowledge that
No.
we would be getting an external.
No, not at all.
I think expectations make a big difference. I know if I had bought the digital, I feel like this would be a shining possibility. This would be cool. I would like this. And I'd be disappointed if it wasn't going to happen. But I don't know as I would be upset because I feel like this was just something that potentially could have been. Like any other product we see that has promise, or I mean, heck, we're just coming out of the CES for this year and all those cool products, many of which are never going to see the light of day. Can tell from my own times attending said convention myself in the past. And there's always a certain amount of excitement, but and obviously just a little bit of disappointment. But then again, we didn't structure our year's worth of purchases around those things. So
Sure,
I
sure.
feel like very analogous there.
The one person I feel bad for is the person who bought a PS5 digital simply because that was all they could find. Now the PS5 shortage is over, but I mean, people who were like, you know what, I just want to play a PlayStation 5. I found one at Walmart, Target, Best Buy, wherever. I'm just gonna buy this because it's all there is. There's no disc ones here, and they're probably thinking, oh, it'd be so dope if I could get the disc as an external thing and plug it into my USB or my USB C, and now they're not able to. Life isn't fair, but I think that Sony could, make this available for the digital. They'd make more money and they'd make their consumers happy. And Mac, anything else you want to say before we move on?
Just that I hope you all get everything you want and more out of a disk drive. I hope that the rumors prove to be true in the good ways and prove to be wrong in the unfortunate ways.
Nice.
I'm looking out for you, PS5ers.
That has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, now we turn to some history. This last week, in years that came before, we had I'm going to say it, a plethora of fantastic games.
Big
And
words.
Mr. Nice Guy, I'm going to start with more recent and move toward the end, starting with the 2005 release on the GameCube of Resident Evil 4. Um, Now, personally, I waited a much longer, and the PC or the Wii version is a lot more, what I played. I played Resident Evil 4 on the Wii, and not until much after I had actually played Resident Evil 5.
Sure.
But Resident Evil 4 is when we made the move in the Resident Evil franchise from, I would say, survival horror to action horror. And I love that move. I know I've probably told tales. I know I've told tales on this very show about being paralyzed with fear in the early Resident Evil titles, in a way that that Resident Evil 3 and 4, or sorry, 4 and 5 and presumably 6, would not impact me the same way. And they're my favorites. that's what I feel like is the real. I have some nostalgia for the original Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 2. That's where I got in on the Resident Evil franchise. But Resident Evil 4 and 5 is where I felt that turn is where I felt I really started to enjoy what Resident Evil was, could be,
Nice.
appreciate the lore. That was everything for me. Mr. Nice Guy, I did you play much Resident Evil games?
I played a little bit of Resident Evil 4. It is not for me, man. And I feel bad. There's a
Okay.
couple games that are like widely recognized as good. That's one of them. Final Fantasy's another. I've just never gotten into them. I played some Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. Not for me.
Gotcha. Well, I had a great old time of it. I'd encourage anybody, if it's not your thing, if action horror is not your thing, maybe survival horror is your thing. Have you tried any of the early ones, like 1 through 3 by chance?
No, but try to sell me on it, man. My brother just converted me to anime. You're gonna get me onto Resident Evil. Which one should I pick?
Resident Evil 2, I would say. 1 is good, but 2, they really, they worked on the formula, they perfected it a lot more. Resident Evil 3, I feel like had a lot more, shall we say, quick timey type stuff. They experimented with some of those. Oh, we got to make a quick choice that
Oh
I
yeah,
don't care much for, but some people love.
sure.
So yeah, well, I'd say Resident Evil 2, maybe even 2 remake if you are so inclined. But I would say go pop in the disc into your old PS1, which I know you have,
I do.
and
I do.
give it a go. Yeah. Well, let's keep on moving. Released in 2003 for the original Xbox, Panzer Dragoon Orta. Um, it's a fine game. It's fine. It's what you would expect from a Panzer Dragoon game. However, the real cool thing about Panzer Dragoon Orta is inside of the game itself is also the original Panzer Dragoon that
Oh,
was originally released for the Dreamcast, and as a result, is significantly harder as compared to the original Xbox to get your hands on and to play. So if you don't have a working Dreamcast as well as a working copy of the game, many fewer were sold, then this is your entry into a fantastic game. Two games for the price of one. Cannot recommend them as a unit highly enough. It's value, great value even. Um, but and I think this is the most important from this week in years past.
Hmm.
A release in 1990 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, The Magic of Scheherazade.
oh,
Mr.
tell
Nice
me
Guy, have you
more.
played this one?
I have not. I'm excited to
Dude,
hear about it.
this is one of those that I think is truly a hidden gem of the NES. Um, Consider a mashup of Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy, where you have both the sort of real time as well as the turn based combat. You get to do things like picking a class. While Quest for Glory would beat that to the punch in by like a year, it's probably close enough in time that it's Convergent Evolution. It's got great music, better visuals for the time, of course, and
Sure.
excellent implementation. And I know that you have access these days. And Mr. Nice Guy, I want to challenge you to go for the Magic of Scheherazade and tell me whether or not you think it holds up. Because I think it's a great example of
Scheherazade?
later stage. Yeah. Schereazade.
It comes right up. Okay, I'm going to have to check this out.
Excellent. I knew I could con ya. So yeah, those are some of the excellent titles that we've saw this week in years before, and if you haven't tried them out, you owe it to yourself to give them a go.
Nice. I learned about a game today that I did not know about, and I'm very excited to go try it. I have some NES games behind me. That's just a small portion of my collection. Legend of Scheherazade. I'm gonna have to search for it. Physical for
Please
life.
do. I know that my recommendation of Little Samson turned out to be well received. So, or
Li-
did you recommend that to me?
I don't know. I feel like I probably recommended that one to you, but I could be wrong, Mac. I could be misremembering.
Either way, I know it went one direction in this relationship, and either way, the other one of us was totally right.
It's a great game, not a hidden gem, but well liked. Well,
Well,
it is.
hidden gem for the fact that like there are basically no copies of
Yeah,
it.
it's like
So,
2,500
yeah.
bucks for one game, so
Eesh.
it's expensive. It's expensive. Well, moving on. It's time for our topic of the week, where we talk about something relevant in gaming and give our opinions on it, and we like to get your opinions too. And chat, this is a big one because Mac and I have dabbled in the subject of how much longer will physical consoles exist, blah blah blah. I won't say my opinion, but I want to read this article and then hear what Mac has to say, and then hear what you good people have to say. This is on WCCFtech.com. Forespoken PC requirements confirm that RAM specs are going up. Today, Square Enix finally unveiled the official PC system requirements for Forspoken, its upcoming action RPG made by Luminous Productions, the team behind Final Fantasy XV. We were expecting high requirements given that it's one of the first next generation only games. It will only be released on PlayStation 5 and PC, but these specs were even higher than we thought. So listen up, y'all, especially for NVIDIA users. The GeForce RTX 4080 is usually much stronger than the AMD Radeon RX 6800, but they're listed together as GPUs capable of delivering 4K at 60 frames per second at ultra settings in Forspoken. I want to just get to the system requirements. And here's where it is. It says, even the CPU requirements are strong. To play Forspoken at Ultra 4K, Luminous Productions recommends one of the most powerful CPUs on the market, Intel's i7 12700, but its RAM requirements, Mac, that are perhaps the most striking. Following the announcement of Returnal and Hogwarts Legacy, it's safe to say that 16 gigabytes will be the minimum specification from now on, while 32 will be required to play well at Ultra HD. So they're requiring 32 gigabytes of RAM to play this game on ultra settings, and it also requires 150 gigabytes of SDD space. Now, the thing that I found most interesting about this is that this game is going to have DualSense controller support day one. So in the past, if you were like me and said, hey, I'm not going to play this on PC because they add all these cool features to the DualSense controller that you can only experience on PlayStation, now that's going to be supported on PC day one. So, Mac, here's my question for you. Are game consoles just a poor man's solution to a PC?
That's bait.
It's not bait. It's not bait. Rephrase
So
it how you want to answer it. But you see where I'm going with this.
I do see where you're going with this. I do have a question. Did they mention what the minimum specs for this game are with respect to graphics and CPU?
Not in
I
this
imagine that
article.
probably is outside of the purview of the article.
But that's
Yeah.
fair, though, because
That
these are ultra settings that we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I will say before before I get to actually answering your question, that as someone who firmly believes, and I'll shout it from the mountaintops until the cows come home, is that video games are art, and the more people that we can get to experience video games, the better. And
So,
I hope that there is a way to play this game at lower enough specs so that you can at least play it, enjoy it, if not get the buttery smooth 4K experience.
okay, so if you don't mind, maybe I'll rephrase the question. Because once again, and I want to be clear, we're console agnostic here. Like, we're not fanboys of anything. Mac, I guess what I'm really trying to get at is we've reached the point where what's the benefit of playing on a console? If your PC can have all of the same benefits, the dual sense feedback, like, is there a benefit of there being a PlayStation 6 and a next Xbox going forward?
I'm glad you phrased it that way because I think the value that I see, especially in consoles, is, gosh, please don't come at me with your torches and your pitchforks, but video game consoles are going to be very useful for establishing a baseline for where the video game requirements and technology are, rather than establishing the upper bounds. And I appreciate video game consoles as they get released, sort of making a kind of stepwise motion instead of being sort of this exponential curve of more RAM, more graphics. If this game has to be compatible with the PS5, then I know that I can build a rig that will perform somewhere in the PS5's ballpark.
Sure, sure.
I really appreciate that we have video game consoles that are making that metered movement through the tech so that I personally don't get left behind. That's something that I feel like I benefit from and I appreciate, even though I myself have none of the current gen of consoles,
Well, you
nor do
do.
I plan on.
You have a
Is
Steam Deck.
the Steam Deck,
I,
you would call that a current gen console?
I would, because it allows you to have the capability to play a lot of the PlayStation 5 exclusives. Yeah,
Okay.
Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man
Mhm.
Remastered, Last of Us Part 1 in March is coming to Steam. So I would consider that to be current gen, absolutely. Chat, what do you think?
Okay. Well, then, with the exception of the Steam Deck, I don't have, personal access to any of the current gems. But now, too, some of the things that are being said by those who are here with us live as we do this recording, Ishmobile is bringing up that the consoles are always cheaper than building the rigs. Yep, always true. And while you could characterize it, as you did earlier, Mr. Nice Guy, about poor man's gaming
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
consoles,
We're not rich ourselves, y'all.
that's one way to put it. Oh yeah, it's true. We have to shell out for every single thing we get.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, man. And I think I feel bad about saying poor man's PC, because once again, we're console agnostic. We pay for our own games, we pay for our own consoles, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I don't think we have another generation after PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox. First of all, Galvatron brought up the Stadia earlier. The Stadia in concept was a brilliant idea. The ability to take a controller and be able to connect it to a compatible screen like an iPad, a phone, et cetera, as long as you had access to good enough internet. I think that a big part of that is the future. The cloud, for better or worse, is a lot of where we're headed. And now that we see that you cannot have to buy a physical game, but you can download Forespoken day one on your PC and get all the benefits of the controller feel and customized graphics better than your TV or as good as your TV through your PC, leads me to believe that we're going to see less consoles going forward. And it's exciting, but it's also kind of sad.
Yeah. I don't think I could add anything to that. That was perfect.
The last thing I'll say real quick, and then we'll move on. I own an Xbox Series X. Sorry, Xbox fanboys and fangirls. It's one of the worst purchases that I have ever made because there are not any exclusives on it. And Microsoft has taken a stance of saying, hey, play how you want to play. Mac, what did you want to say? I'll finish when you with your rebuttal.
Worse than your purchase of the Virtual Boy?
I don't own a Virtual Boy, but if I did, at least that's a piece of history. But anyway, no.
Well, what's to say that the Xbox isn't going to be a piece of history too?
It will be, but I guess Microsoft has taken the stance of you can play wherever you want, right? If you have a phone, you can play Game Pass on your phone with a backbone controller, which I have. If you have a PC, which I have, I could play Game Pass on my PC. Additionally, Steam Deck, I could play on there. The Xbox just sits there on my TV because I never want to play it. Like, I can play all those other places when I want to play Halo or another game that's exclusive to Xbox that's not really exclusive because I can play it everywhere else. And it looks like Sony is starting to go that direction a little bit. We now have Horizon Zero Dawn. We have both Spider-Man games. We have The Last of Us. We have Returnal announced. All those PlayStation 5 exclusive Sackboy on Steam or soon to be on Steam. with a lot of the same features that exist on the PlayStation 5 in terms of DualSense, I think consoles are starting to die out, and it's unfortunate.
It certainly could be. And I think it would be unfortunate just from a personal, my personal investment. But I will point out the thing that Kane brings up here in the chat, that the problem with the cloud gaming is that the infrastructure between us and our games winds up being the big limiting step. And the United States, where we both are, ranks fairly low in internet infrastructure, and doesn't seem like it's going to be changing anytime soon. Which, who knows? Maybe that will keep game consoles more relevant for longer because of those challenges. But I would just really hate to be left behind in that way, where it's like, well, it's all cloud gaming now, but here where I am, the internet data packets come in on cheap.
Yeah. We'll have to see what happens. Once again, I see people in the chat saying they like the Xbox. I totally get it. I'm just saying that those games can be played many different places. And for me personally, the Series X doesn't get used that much. That has been our topic of the week.
All right. Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. I've put a link in the chat. We can take a look over it, discuss some of the virtues, some of the vices, and whether or not we think it should be kicked out of here or kick started. This is called Lumentale Memories of Trey. This game is a shout out to at least one very special person out there, Venice. This is their take on a monster tamer genre type game. It's a 3D world and has a very you're looking at it now, would you say kind of Animal Crossing is that style of 3D?
I wouldn't actually. Yeah, I would to a certain extent compare it to Animal Crossing. It has some of those same features. That's a good comparison.
Well, thanks. But the sprites themselves are definitely large 2D pixel art sprites.
Yeah.
It might be at some point in time, rather than to just say what it's got in this monster tamer, genre, and rather to just say what differentiates it. Because it's kind of all there. Instead of trainers, you've got lumens. Instead of Pokemon, you've got Animon, and instead of a Digitrainer or Pokeballs, you've got the Holokin. There's a lot of stuff that's rather typical to the genre present here. You want to go catch new monsters to tame them? Go out there and find your Animon with your Holokin and become the best Lumen that there is. It's all there. There is a quote that I would like to point out from this. To quote them, quote, this game, quote, is born out of our love for the monster collector genre and our mixed feelings about its current state, end quote. And for that quote being in there, I don't know if I really see evidenced in the Kickstarter what their feelings are. I really want to know what their feelings are because I want to know what exactly is it about the current state that they have mixed feelings for. That being said, our resident Pokemaster, Spennis, is not here presently to evaluate the virtues or the vices, so I'll keep an ear to the ground for what he thinks about this later on. But what we do know is that it's a $22 minimum buy-in if you want to get a copy of the game released on Steam when it comes out. The expected release date is December 2024, so
Okay.
basically 2 years out from right now. It does state that there is a free demo coming to Steam during the campaign, but as of our recording right now, it is not currently available. With 20 days left, it's already 97% of the way funded.
Nice.
And so I do have a side note here. I'm always a bit skeptical when I see a Kickstarter that already has all of its highest reward tiers filled by the time I get there. Especially when those reward tiers are like $2,500 and the like. I understand the reward tiers filling up for a ground floor. Oh, it's normally $22, but it's $15 if you are the early bird.
Right,
That
right.
I get. I understand those
Sure.
fill up immediately. But when huge big things are filled up, filled up completely, all the tall tiers first, I go, um, so maybe I've got it all wrong and I'm
Right,
behind the times.
right.
I'm very often behind the times. I'm old man yells at cloud. Um, but after all, my general take on most of these high tier items that we see on Kickstarters is that they're always asking too much
Sure,
and not
sure.
giving quite enough for the high tiers. But oh well. So the game company, Beehive Studios, they have released a game before.
Ah,
While this is their first Kickstarter, they did release a game in 2021 that was fine. It was a mobile game, kind of a runner type game, side scrolling runner, endless runner type thing. And that's the only project. It's the last project that's been done. And their about page has that they've got a team of 10. So 10 people, 2 years. What are they at now? They're at just shy of $80,000 to make this work. Mr. Nice Guy, what's your take?
so first of all, I didn't realize until the other day, and I know Pokemon is huge. This genre there's a huge, huge fan base around monster collecting type of games.
Hmm.
I don't know if you knew this, Mac. There's a Pokemon MMO. Did you know that? I didn't know this until like 2 days ago. I was Googling some stuff and came across it. Point being, even with all the Pokemon games that are coming out, there's an audience that's very hungry for this type of thing. And by the way, the Pokemon MMO is made by like a third party, not by Nintendo.
Ah, okay.
And so, my point is, I think that something like this, if it can build a community, it's a good alternative to what already exists out there, creates more competition, and gets rid of, as Mac would say, the monopoly that Nintendo has on Pokemon. So I think this is a good idea. I think it looks gorgeous. I think that $22 is absolutely an acceptable price. And I don't think they're asking for too much money. This looks like it would be fun. I think this looks great.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think it's very promising. But I mean, you tell me you're going to have a demo, and you don't have the demo. I mean, come
Right.
on,
But they but
bring me the
they
demo.
but they've been honest. They've said, "Hey, we're going to have it during the process. Like it takes time." I get it.
Uh, yeah. Well, I suppose for me that just means I'll have to take, instead of saying kick, I think I'm just going to have to say I'll wait and see until I can check the demo. Because I feel like that could be what pushes me over the edge here and convinces me to buy a copy, is whether or not that demo looks like it can be something. Because there's plenty of stuff there that looks like it could be in-game footage, and is very promising. But like, I just need a chance to try it and play it and see if it harmonizes with my voice,
If
as
it,
it
if
were.
it harmonizes, I like that. I like that. My vote is Kickstart, not even necessarily because I like these types of games, but because I like that someone is trying to come out with a legitimate alternative. Now, I don't see co-op or multiplayer in here at all, and I think that as people collect their monsters, they're going to want to battle them. So hopefully there's some type of functionality that allows that, but I say Kickstart.
Okay. And people are currently weighing in the chat. So far, I'm seeing more kickstart than kicks. So once again, maybe Mac is just old man yells at cloud. But either way, we wish Beehive Studios all the best on Lumentale, a game that is almost certainly going to meet its funding goal.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's keep things moving. It's now time for Nerd Flex. Woo-hoo.
Woohoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host, and sometimes you come pretty close. Mac, you have something you want to say to the people, right?
Yes, indeed. It is episode 255, and that means it is time for a sound test. The way that this goes is that every single episode, you guys come to us with your nerdy questions and we have to answer them. Time for us to turn the tables. I have a mystery sound from somewhere, someone, somehow in video
Games.
games. Go ahead, take a listen, see if you can identify where it comes from. And if you are the first to correctly identify it on social media, use the hashtag sound test so that we know what you're going for and identify this episode, episode 255. And if you win, if you correctly identify it first, we will give you a special prize, lovingly handcrafted.
Oh no! Maction's internet just went down. He'll be back in just a minute. But while he's gone, a word from our sponsor. Do you have viewers and friends in your stream who are always bragging about their expensive tech and trying to prove you wrong? Well, check out Galvatron Be Gone. It's a new spray, and when you spray it, it makes all your viewers only say positive things forever. Now, back to Mac.
And so, there is your mystery sound, everybody. Good luck, and get back to us.
All right. Well, hey, let's keep things moving. We already have a question in the chat from our good friend Ishmobile. Here's what he asks. In Outer Wilds, which place is not in the base game? No DLCs. A, the Sun Station. B, the Black Hole Forge. C, the Stranger. D, the Ash Twins.
I have absolutely no idea. I've never played Outer Wilds, and yeah.
I've played Outer Wilds. I've played a little bit of Outer Wilds. It didn't click for me, but everyone says it's amazing. And so I feel like I need to get back into it. I'm trying to think of which place would not be in a base game. Excuse me. And I feel like Go ahead.
Black Hole Forge, right? A black hole seems like the type of thing that's very sci-fi-y, but also, feels like the thing that you would get later on down the road rather than like in the first thing. Sun Station, maybe. Stranger, Ash Twins. I mean,
see, and that's the thing to me. I would think that with DLC that they would have a more obscure name for the location. So just based on that, I would go with the Black Hole Forge.
Okay, I'm going to go with you on that. That seems
reasonable.
Seems as good an answer as any.
Seems reasonable. The rest of y'all here, thank you for being here. If you have questions, multiple choice, get them in the chat right now. We'd love to answer them. Mac, what was the answer to that one?
So turns out the correct answer was the Stranger. That apparently is not. So in the base game, we know that there is a Sun Station, a Black Hole Forge, and Ash Twins in the Outer Wilds. So, Mr. Nice Guy, I guess you gotta play it until you hit those.
Gotta play it till you hit. Now, people in the chat are saying the game starts off slow but gets better. I may have to give it a second shot. I don't know if it's still on Game Pass or not. But anyway, moving right along. Mac, let's go to our test bank. We'll pick a random question. We'll see what comes up and put our noggins together. No Google, no help to see what comes up. So here's question number 2. It's a Konami question, and it's a red one, which I believe means it's hard. Using the rune sword in Symphony of the Night displays what German word? Using the rune sword in Symphony of the Night displays what German word?
So Symphony of the Night, I believe, is the one that came out for PlayStation. And I know some people who speedrun that game. But one of the things that's interesting about speedrunning is that you very often skip over
The
tons
dialogue.
of stuff in
Yeah.
order to get through the game. I don't know as I've seen German writing, uh, but if I just had to guess, and of course it's not multiple choice, so we can go with whatever. I would say the German word for, like, I don't know, sword, maybe? I know it's a little on the nose, though.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna go with blitzkrieg. I don't even know what that
Okay.
means. I know it's a German
Blitzkrieg
word.
up.
I know. Yeah, see, that's all I know. I, I'm gonna go with that. Final answers. Let's see what we got. We may get clean swept today. Okay. So it was actually verboten, which is German
Oh, forbidden.
for forbidden.
That that makes that makes sense.
I don't know that it
Well,
does, but we'll take it.
well, I mean, there's lots of like. Okay, maybe it doesn't make sense. Point being, we do have another question in the chat. This one, I believe, is from Landon. So thanks for that.
Okay.
In Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, which enemy has the most health? White, blue, silver, or gold? So which of the enemy variations
Yeah.
has the most health? White, blue, silver, or gold? Um, I'm inclined to say gold
I'm about to.
because,
Yeah, I'm about to finish replay it before the sequel. It's been a while.
yeah, same here.
It almost seems like that's a trick question because gold, it's usually
Doesn't
like
it just?
it's usually like silver, gold, platinum,
Mhm,
diamond, that type of thing. Um,
mhm.
and so gold would usually be the highest. I'm actually thinking it might be white, but I'd feel bad if I went with that and then it was gold.
You don't think I'm going to feel bad when it turns out to be white and I convinced you to go for gold?
Well, I don't know. I
But we've
mean,
got to agree on something. So
gold,
it looks like gold it is.
gold. It is final answer. Let's keep it moving, and fingers crossed that we got it right. If we didn't, it's not the end of the world.
Woohoo!
Hey,
The gold. It happens when silver is struck by lightning. Ah,
Landon, you
fantastic.
tricky, tricky fellow. Well, that has been Nerdflix.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
So, today we have a little bit of an update on the D&D drama.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on this podcast. And in last episode, I gave a general overview about the Dungeons and Dragons saga, really the third edition, the OGL 1.0, in order to try and cultivate a third party sort of fulsome community around third party products. The changes for fourth edition, how that didn't work out, leading to the rise of Paizo and Pathfinder, who make millions of dollars every year as a big company, and of course the OGL 1.1 changes and the timeline, everything. I stand by basically every word I said in episode 254, especially where I pointed out that we had just speculation so far, and it seemed like there could be some bad stuff going on. And I did not want to go into specifics until we knew it was real. And I'm super glad that we didn't, because I'm quite sure I would have been wrong. And I dislike being wrong. But what we know now, Mr. Nice Guy,
What's that?
is that that leaked OGL 1.1 that people were frustrated about was indeed turned out to be a legitimate document. Conceded, agreed to, acknowledged by Wizards of the Coast on Friday the 13th.
Okay.
And I do want to stress that there were some people who were upset about, shall we say, the right things. The wrong things, obviously, in that document, the things that were a problem. But there were some people who were frustrated about things that were kind of a non-starter in the first place. And the one big thing that really needed to be addressed was provision 10B of the non-commercial and 12B of the commercial agreement. They're the same thing, and it's just one thing. And it looks like, hopefully, Wizards of the Coast got the message. So, in that, that provision, as written, said anything made relying on their OGL allowed Wizards of the Coast to do whatever they wanted with that stuff, non revocable, in perpetuity. So, Mr. Nice Guy, if you got it in your mind to write a module for Dungeons and Dragons,
Okay.
you relied on that OGL contract, you wrote it up, you had characters, you had settings, you had all these fantastic things in there um, that Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, and by extension Hasbro,
Sure.
had non-revocable, perpetual license to do whatever they wanted with the intellectual property that you created within that framework, your characters, your whatever,
Okay.
because you relied on that. Now, they said that they would fix that and they would change that, and that it was not our intention to steal Mr. Nice Guy's D&D module that he wrote up. Just to protect us from people suing us because of, we came up with similar ideas.
Mm.
I think that explanation was a little disingenuous because
Yeah.
that's what 10A and 12A addressed. But we won't go there. Now, for a lot of us, right? We see these types of terms and service repeated. Like we see those types of clauses put into video games and things like that all the time. So it doesn't seem to us as video game people like this would be as big of a thing. But D&D, these things are less like a game and they're more like a folklore. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is more like. It's more like a cooperative folklore than it is a video game. And I think that it's important to remember that the mechanisms that make a lot of sense in video games and would not seem out of place in a terms of service for a video game really don't make much sense in there. Anyway, from the standpoint of things I love, I have to say there are still some things that Wizards of the Coast needs to address, but we are already going long, so I will just say that I've seen three things people say about all of this that people really need to tighten down and understand. I recommend read the OGL 1.0. It's a couple pages long. Read the OGL 1.1, that leaked draft, and read their fan content provision. Read all three of these side by side. It'll take you much less than the runtime of our very podcast here, and you will come away knowing things that are overblown and things that are underblown, frankly. And last but most certainly not least, I referenced episode 134. I re-referenced that in our last episode. And since this lots of attention has been garnered from actual, honest to God, intellectual property lawyers have started weighing in on this, and at least both Legal Eagle on YouTube, who is a copyright attorney, as well as the Electronic Frontier Foundation, have all weighed in their various ways. And bit of a victory lap, they agree with Mr. Maction's analysis of the situation. So I'm not a lawyer, but on occasion, respected legal authorities agree with me. So
Nice.
make of that what you will. That's just some legalese.
Nice. And that has been our show almost. But before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that. And Mac, we both watched The Last of Us. We know that. I want to hear what you've been watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that show to start.
Okay, so I've been watching Doctor Who season 9. I heartily dislike Stephen Moffat writing lines for Peter Capaldi. He's just so unlikable, and I feel like Stephen Moffat just wants to be smart enough that he can be mean to everybody because he's so dumb that he thinks that smart people are mean to everybody and that gets them everything in life. That's not how life works. Smart, clever people who are mean to everybody have money, but they have nothing else going
Sure.
on in their life.
Sure.
And that's not a life to live. But no, I mean, Stephen Moffat, Sherlock, Peter Capaldi, Doctor Who. I mean, he's got a type that he writes. Anyway, I'm also watching Wednesday on
Ah,
Netflix. But to the thing that should we save Last of Us for that tail end, Mr. Nice
sure,
Guy?
sure, if we want to. Yeah.
Okay. I've been playing Hollow Knight, trying to getting
Nice.
back into that. I've also been playing GURPS and some 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. What about you?
So obviously I've been watching The Last of Us, as I mentioned. In terms of what I've been playing an old retro game you might have heard of called Super Mario Brothers 3. Oh, and by the way, chat, your boy Mr. Nice Guy recorded a 60-second video called Games You Must Play. And I'm going to do one of these a week. We're going to put them up on TikTok and Instagram. Links to those will go in the Discord shortly, as well as on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/2nerds in a podcast. So feel free to subscribe there and look for some awesome content that's coming. But anyway, Mario 3, been playing a lot more retro stuff lately, but also playing Killing Floor 2, which is effectively a zombie game. Been playing it with my buddy. Getting in some Destiny 2, and just all kinds of fun stuff on the PC, Among Us with the kids. Now, Mac, in terms of what I've been watching, let's just dive into The Last of Us. And then we'll read the chat what
Okay.
you guys are watching. What did you think about The Last of Us?
So I really appreciated the liberties that they took with how they opened the story, and I'm trying not to spoil too many things, and how they focused on the point of view of one specific character and followed that journey until it was no longer the case. I liked how we had scenes, like things in the background, the watch shop, those sorts of stuff. I appreciated experiencing the world through those eyes. Um, I found, unfortunately, that I just didn't have the stomach for everything going sideways.
In The Last of
Um,
Us?
it just In The Last of Us, yeah, it just felt like the depiction was just too real to me. I did watch the whole first episode, but I found it rough to get through.
Interesting. Now, had you watched the game? I know you have not played the game, but had you watched like gameplay of the game?
I had, yeah.
Okay. So
I
I
mean, I think it's just coming to me at a weird time in my life, basically.
I get it.
A time where what I'm looking for is escapism instead of the grittiness. I don't need and I think sometimes that works. Like sometimes you need something to fight against. Sometimes you just need to not think about it. And I feel like I'm at that thing. I don't need to channel my anger toward the clickers. I need to just imagine a world like Star Trek. I think that's just where I'm at
No,
personally.
I
And,
get it.
you know,
I get it, because sometimes with shows you just need to be in the right mood. Same thing with video games. Like I remember starting Fallout 3
yeah.
years ago and being like, I am not going to play this game. This is terrible. And then when I needed to get into a good RPG, tried it again and it worked. I thought that The Last of Us, the first episode, was phenomenal. I don't think anything is perfect, but I think that they did a really, really good job of staying true to the game and a really, really good job of casting characters, regardless of physical appearance, who had the range to play the roles that they needed them to play. There were a lot of people on the internet trolling, saying that Bella looks nothing like Ellie and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter.
Don't you dare besmirch. Bella knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, she did a phenomenal job, right? These are people with feelings, and if I didn't think that they did a good job, I wouldn't say it, but I do think that all of the people involved have done a very, very good job, and I'm excited to see what happens, even though I know the story. I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought it was a 9 out of 10 first episode. So cool. Mac, real quick, what are people into in the chat?
Sure. So let's see. Kane's playing Graveyard Keeper and My Time in Sandrock. Galvatron's been watching Last of Us, Star Wars Bad Batch Season 2, Old Enough Season 2, and Pinocchio and Willow. Buster Rydon has been watching Bad Batch and is going to play some God of War Ragnarok. Galvatron's playing Gotham Knights, Callisto Protocol, High on Life, and Vampire Survivors. And that's what we have. Thanks for the recommendations, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. This has been episode number 255 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Friendly reminder, our content is coming. We're doing way more social media stuff this year. So please follow us on Twitter, follow the Discord. Y'all know how to get in touch with us. But look for that Instagram and that TikTok stuff to be going up shortly. Y'all are the best viewers on Twitch and the best listeners on podcast services. Be excellent to each other, and we'll see y'all next week.